Good evening, folks. How are we tonight? All right. Okay. We will be having some formal presentations. However, we do want to keep the enthusiasm and the attention right there where you started it off. And we will be having a Q&A toward the end of our conversation this evening for the last about 30 minutes or so. My name is Rhett Wimmer. I am the Director of Community Building here at the Utah chapter of FAIR, and honored to be introducing tonight's guests and giving us just a little overview of the flow this evening. First and foremost, I have to say that for me personally, it's an honor to be inviting Bayan to be here with us tonight, as he's the reason why I'm here. And perhaps the reason some of you are here because of a Wall Street Journal article that I read 18 months ago. Mercy. I followed the link to FAIR at the end there, and through that, one thing led to another, and Alicia, myself, and some others that are here started having unofficial Utah chapter FAIR meetings many months ago, and we're happy to not just be an official chapter now, with sub-chapter leaders, various committee leaders, and some outstanding resources within our tool belt. But we also now are privileged to have 3 of our leaders here and advisory board members to address us. So we feel really honored to have them participating. Do I need to be talking into the mic? No. Okay. I will, I think, preface tonight's conversation, if I may, with a thought that I was having earlier today. I was reading through LinkedIn, as folks often do, and came across, I think, an inspiring and interesting quote from Adam Grant, who many of you may know, a well-known author and life coach is not the right term. That he deserves far more credibility than that, but not to speak ill of life coaches. But Grant, who has studied all sorts of ideas about culture and business and what drives success and what drives and success by many measures, said today, too many people spend their lives being dutiful descendants instead of good ancestors. The responsibility of each generation is not to please their predecessors, it is to improve things for their offspring. It is more important to make your children proud than your grandparents proud. For those of you that have participated before, you will know that during the very first FAIR chapter official meeting, my grandfather spoke. Dr. Larry Wimmer, who was a professor of economics at BYU for 45 plus years. And he spoke of his experience as a graduate student at the University of Chicago and the encounters that he had with the truly abhorrent and truly ever-present and visible racism of the 1960s. He shared a story about in 1963, when my dad was with him, they were invited by their black neighbors in the public housing that they were living in. They were invited to go see the fireworks for the 4th of July. Well, great, let's get the families together. They start walking down over to the park together, and their next door neighbors, their friends, this black family stopped at the street when it was time to enter into the park. And Grandpa, looking back and knowing what that meant, but not having thought of it until just at that moment, realized that was the moment for him when he stopped thinking, someone needs to start doing something for these people, and started thinking, what am I going to do to help these good people? So with my ancestor, of whom I am extremely proud, in mind, I thank all of you for coming today. Because what will I do to help these good people is manifest is a question that you all demonstrate in being here tonight. To hear from voices that are truly pro-human, that are compassionate, that seek to avoid the divisiveness that is so prevalent and prominent in our society, and to pursue a more common view of humanity, to acknowledge that one true race, the human race. And so it's my honor tonight to welcome these guests for you. I'll read briefly for you the biographies of these individuals. We'll first, I should say we will first hear a quick welcome from our one of our presidents, Alicia Alba of the Utah chapter of FAIR. We'll then turn it over for the remainder of the evening to our visiting guest, Bayan, who's the founder of FAIR, an entrepreneur and investor. Bayan previously co-founded EOS Products, a personal care brand best known today for its iconic egg-shaped lip balm. Yeah, that's right. As an equity partner and chief operating officer of the Kind Group, a privately held company dedicated to the development and expansion of brands. It's wholly inadequate an introduction, but you'll get to know more of his philosophy and approach if you're not already familiar with it tonight. We'll next hear from Angel Eduardo. He is a writer, musician, photographer, and visual artist, best known for coining and promoting the rhetorical concept of star manning. Yes. He's the director of messaging and editorial, as well as an advisory board member for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, where he helps shape the organization's pro-human approach to our often contentious and divided discourse. Angel is also a columnist for the Center of Inquiry, where he writes on science, communication, skepticism, and morality. He holds a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from CUNY, Hunter College, and his writing has been featured in Newsweek, Aereo Magazine, Mr. Beller's Neighborhood, and the Caribbean Writer, among other print and online publications. Lastly, but certainly not least, we'll then hear from Dr. Adam Seagrave, who's an associate director and associate professor in the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership, as well as an associate director of the Center for Political Thought and Leadership at ASU. He was a member of the executive and steering committee and co-chaired the Political Science and Civics Task Force for the Educating for American Democracy project from 2019 to 2021. He's currently a senior fellow for education with FAIR, where he is leading the development of a very exciting, I will add, K through 12 curriculum blending American civics and diversity education. He is also co-founder and co-director of the Race and the American Story project. It's an honor, once again, to welcome our guests here tonight. So please join me in welcoming them as we turn the time over to Alicia.
I'll stand on my tiptoes. I just wanted to take a quick minute and just thank everybody so much for coming. As I was watching the RSVPs come rolling in, it was like a Christmas present. Every time I'd open up that computer screen and see just the breadth that we have here of different perspectives of people who care about these issues and who want to make a difference. And we may have different ideas for what may be the best approach, but I know that we have so much common ground that we can build on, and that we can have everybody here having a seat at the table is just so amazing to me. This is to me, the big, huge power and potential of FAIR, is bringing together people on these issues so that we can find solutions that will benefit everybody, that will help address the needs of every Utahn, of every child, and of everybody in America, ultimately, and really across the world. So anyways, I just want to say thank you so much, and I'm so excited. I'm going to step aside so that these guys can get going with their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Excuse me. My name is Bayan Bartning. I'm the founder and president of FAIR. I really want to thank Rhett and Alicia and Jefferson. Alicia and Jefferson, we had an amazing day today visiting the Capitol and meeting with legislators from both political parties, and I think that was a fantastic experience. I am so impressed with what this chapter has accomplished, and we're very excited to be here to support your efforts. I'm going to talk for you I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the pro-human perspective. I think for many of you, hopefully this is information that you're already very familiar with, but I think it's worth recapping. And I know there are some people in the audience who are not familiar with the pro-human approach. So if we can go to the next slide. So what does it mean to be pro-human? So this is a definition that we have on our website. I think different people may, it's actually a question. Angel and Melissa are doing a podcast where at the end of the podcast, they ask each of the guests, what does it mean to be pro-human to you? And it's been fascinating just to hear different people giving different answers. But we believe that being pro-human means advocating for one human race. We think that's a very important part of being pro-human. And it's also advocating for individual civil rights and liberties and a compassionate opposition to racism and intolerance that's rooted in dignity and our common humanity. Before I go through the rest of the presentation, Angel's going to talk for a few minutes about his personal experience and his perspective about what it means to be pro-human.
Hey, everyone.
Can everybody hear okay? No? Okay, we have a microphone here. We can
All
have
right.
these guys.
Sure.
It's a karaoke machine, and we fully expect to see
All right.
There you go. Angel can.
I know.
I won't do it
I'm
today.
tone deaf, so you do not want to hear.
Well, I guess I'll step out of this, step up from behind the lectern. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm honored to be here, honestly, and I'm honored to be part of FAIR, and I'm grateful to Bayan for bringing me on. The pro-human thing is something that's very deep for me. It's very profound for me because it's something that I've been hungry for my whole life, and I'll explain. I grew up in a very multicultural area, right? My school was populated with many, many, many first-generation immigrants, many immigrants from all over the place, including myself. I'm a Dominican American first generation, and my friends came from the Philippines and Egypt and Nigeria and Cuba and El Salvador and all over the United States that moved there, right? And there was a beautiful thing that I didn't recognize at the time, which was that we had all these differences and we had all these different cultural, ethnic backgrounds and histories, but they never got in the way of us just being kids. We were just kids. And we'd sit at the lunch table and it would be these backgrounds, these details about us would be a kind of interesting flourish. It would be a point of curiosity. It would be a reason to ask, oh, what do you guys eat? What language do you speak? How do you guys do this? Do you celebrate Christmas or do you celebrate something else? And it was a point of fascination. It was a point of wanting to get to know someone more, right? And we started to lose that. As we got older and you're trying to figure out who you are, you're trying to find your identity, the easiest way to develop an identity is to define yourself in the negative space of all the things that you're not, all the things that you hate, all the things that you're opposed to, all the things you're against. It creates a kind of shadow of a self. And in your struggle, growing up is hard, in your struggle to become someone and something, you accept that shadow version of yourself. And this kept going. And by the time I got to graduate school, that point of curiosity that had become a point of division, it had become a way to divide and a reason not to speak to somebody, a reason not to hang out with people, a reason not to sit with someone at the lunch table. That dividing line became a fault line. And then it became a reason to hate people. It became a reason to other people. It became a reason to say, no, you don't know me and you don't understand me and there's no way you could because you're nothing like me. And that entire time I was starving to get back to just being kids, to get back to seeing one another as these beautiful, unique fingerprints. We're each a fingerprint. And then I found FAIR. And I found FAIR's message. And it was particularly poignant because during the whole, George Floyd protest, the Black Lives Matter protests, really important and powerful things were happening in the world. But so much of the conversation around those things was divisive and hateful and leaning in the wrong direction when it should have been a point of unity. It was another point of division, another fault line to split us apart. And then we have this pro-human message. And it perfectly satiated that hunger that I had to find some sense of connection, to rekindle that connection and have us just be kids again. So that's what pro-human means to me. Pro-human is about recognizing that you can't just be against things. You can't just be anti-racist. You can't just be anti-white or anti-black or, anti-left or anti-right. You have to be for something. And what better thing to be for than humanity? What better thing to connect to and emphasize and forward but humanity? We're all here, we're all human beings. We're all just kids. And that's what pro-human means to me. And that's why this is so important. And that's why FAIR is so important to me. And that's why I'm here. I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angel. Next slide. Okay, so our mission at FAIR is up here. I want to read through this because I think there are a few points that are very important to emphasize. So FAIR is a nonpartisan organization, and we mean that. We are nonpartisan. We really try hard to take politics out of our messaging. We try hard to make sure that we are what we would call politically inclusive. So we don't want to alienate people who are Democrats. We don't want to alienate people who are Republicans. We don't want to alienate people who are independents. We want to be a place where anybody can feel welcome because the values that we are advocating for are universal values. These are not values that belong to any one political party. We are an organization that's dedicated to advancing civil rights and liberties for all Americans and promoting a common culture based on fairness, understanding, and humanity. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about what specifically we mean by fairness, understanding, and humanity. So a brief history of FAIR. So the Wall Street Journal op-ed actually was less than a year ago. And that was the launch of FAIR. So we launched March 4th, a few days before the Wall Street Journal op-ed was published. But really the idea for FAIR started coming out of an experience that I had with my kids' school in the summer of 2020, leading into the fall of 2020, where I saw the school going down a path of promoting an approach to anti-racism that really fell flat for me, right? And it was partly based on my own personal values, but also my personal experiences, my lived experiences. As somebody who is mixed race, my father is Mexican and Yaqui, my mother is Ashkenazi Jewish, and my father definitely dealt with racism growing up. I think he was born in the border region and was, had his share of hardships due to racism, but he also had amazing opportunities that this country had given him. And I think my own experience being somebody who is a mixture of two different cultures, when my children's school was telling me that the amount of melanin in my children or their ancestry define them entirely, and when people like me who are mixed didn't even fit into the framework that they were offering, this really simplistic, rigid framework, I just knew there had to be a better way. And so I started asking questions. I started really looking into this and trying to understand, how did we get to a point where in response to a real issue, which is racism, we are offering solutions that actually are going to promote and perpetuate the institution of racism. And so that was the genesis of FAIR. We launched in March 2021. June 2021 was our first in-person event. Remember, this is COVID. And we had an in-person event in New York City on Loving Day. And Loving Day, for those who aren't familiar with it, to me is a day that should be celebrated by everyone, because Loving Day is really the end of legalized segregation in the United States. It's the anniversary of Loving v. Virginia, which is a landmark case which outlawed anti-miscegenation laws in the United States. So that was the last legal form of segregation. In September, so just this past fall, we launched Fair Story and Fair Diversity, which Adam, we're going to spend a decent amount of time. I think a lot of people in the room are probably quite interested in the Fair Story curriculum. So Adam is going to spend some time talking about that. And then we have our Fair Diversity DEI training program. So, we wanted to offer, our approach is to offer constructive solutions instead of just being critics. Instead of saying, we don't like this, we want to be able to offer solutions that actually are going to work. And then in December, we launched the Fair Perspectives podcast. And at this point, we are, that is an awesome ringtone. Where can I get that? I really do want it. I love it. So at this point, we have 115 chapters, over 30,000 members, and I will say I think the Utah chapter is definitely one of the most active and most impactful from what I've seen. And we have a lot of volunteers. FAIR is an organization now. One of my goals in launching FAIR was to create an institution that was standing up for these pro-human values, because it didn't seem like many of the institutions that I thought would be standing up for these values were doing so. And I felt that we needed, and many of us felt we needed, a new institution. So at this point, we have over 500 active volunteers, and we have 20 people who are on staff with FAIR. So, so I think it's important to have a mix of that passionate grassroots, but also have people who are on staff who are going to be able to provide some consistency and continuity. So coming back to those three words, fairness, understanding, and humanity. And these are really the values that FAIR is advocating for. I think I'm going to read these, not to bore you, but I think it's important because there was a lot of thought that went into these words and a lot of people were involved in crafting this. But by fairness, we mean treating everyone equally without regard to skin color or other immutable characteristics, and applying the same rules to everyone and rejecting disparagement based on circumstances of birth. So it's really giving everyone a fair shot. I mean, that's an important part of fairness. Understanding is being open-minded. This is about true tolerance. Seeking to understand opinions or behavior, being intellectually curious, right? Trying to understand people, not making assumptions, and considering points of view that are in conflict with your convictions. And humanity, meaning that you recognize that every person has a unique identity. Angel talked about, we're all a fingerprint, right? I think about it as we all are genetically distinct, right? Every single person is genetically distinct. Now, I know that there are some identical twins who may be genetically the same, but for the most part, we are genetically distinct. They still have different fingerprints. But at the same time, we share 99.9% of our genes. So ultimately, we are unique, but we have a shared humanity. We have a common humanity. And that ultimately, it's up to all of us to defend and protect the civic culture that unites us. We have a set of principles of peaceful change, and I think this is another important aspect of what we're trying to do with FAIR, is we want to move forward. Our goal is not to move back to the good old days or move left or move right. Our goal is to move forward and move forward together. And the way that we think we can achieve that is the way that many successful movements have achieved that, which is through what we're calling the principles of peaceful change. You may recognize these are very similar to Martin Luther King's principles of nonviolence. Mahatma Gandhi lived by these principles. I think there are many other movements that have viewed the path forward as one which is based on, if I had to sum it all up, choosing love, not hate, and really trying to bring people together and as Angel said, focus on what we're for and not just what we're against. So the culture that we're trying to instill within FAIR, and I think this is both on the staff side, within the volunteer side, within the movement as a whole, is a culture that is based on several principles: curiosity, courage, compassion. These are three things that Pamela Paresky, for those who may be familiar with her, she's one of the members of the Board of Advisors with FAIR. She's described these as the habits of a free mind. But curiosity, courage, and compassion, these are really three ingredients that are part of the FAIR culture. But also we've coupled that with passion for our mission. So what does FAIR do? And I think many of you are probably familiar with some aspects of this, but you may not realize everything that we're doing. So we are focused on educating people, empowering a grassroots movement, and also providing legal and other forms of advocacy support. So people who need help, we want to be there to help them, but we also really want to empower people to help themselves. So from an education standpoint, we have the FAIR Perspectives podcast. We have our newsletter, which has, I think, close to 40,000 subscribers at this point. We have a YouTube channel. We have a very active media production team that has been producing videos and other educational content. We have been very active on social media, and we have our amazing board of advisors. So at this point, we have 50 people, and we continue to add people. And some have said, well, when are you going to stop adding people? And I don't know that there's an upper limit on how many people we would add to the board of advisors, because I think when we can find people who are passionate and aligned on what we're trying to do, I would love to involve those people in our movement. So we will continue to add to the board of advisors. In terms of empowering people, we have our chapter network, FAIR Story and FAIR Diversity. These are tools that we really want to provide to empower people, to empower institutional leaders to bring the pro-human approach to their institutions or to their communities. We also have professional networks. So we have FAIR in medicine, FAIR in the arts, and we have a FAIR schools program. So what we're trying to do is provide support and provide a network for people who are the vast majority of people who really do believe in these unifying principles, in these values, and we want to provide them with a place to come together. And on the advocacy side, we are approaching this, I would say, in a way which is constructive. And to that end, we don't see litigation as the first place to go. We don't even see it as the second place to go. Litigation is a last resort. But in certain instances, we will engage in litigation. But for the most part, what our legal team does is they reach out in a constructive way to institutions that may not be adopting a pro-human approach. And we try to help them to see that. And we've had a lot of success with institutional leaders coming back to us and saying, oh, I didn't realize we were doing that. And how can I do it in a better way? And so there's been some real constructive engagement, I think, coming even out of the advocacy efforts. I'm going to turn it over to Adam, who's going to talk about FAIR Diversity and FAIR Story. Thank you.
So first let me reiterate my thanks also for having us here. It's been such a wonderful experience, and I really appreciate you all being here tonight and the opportunity to share this with you. So thank you. So as Brian mentioned, FAIR Diversity and FAIR Story are two of the programs by which we empower educators, employees, and corporate leaders. And we empower them in an educative sort of way, right? So the way to bring about peaceful change, as Brian explained, is not through imposition or indoctrination, but through education, through bringing people along and persuading them and helping them to understand things that they didn't understand before. So FAIR Diversity does that through in the corporate training side, so through training employees, administrators, and corporate leaders. One of our first clients was a little company named Sodexo. I might have heard of them. They're actually huge company that they actually adopted FAIR's approach really wholeheartedly from a place that was very different from FAIR's approach. They've been persuaded that FAIR's approach to diversity training is the way to go, and they're now sort of evangelists for the FAIR approach, which has been just really great for the development of our FAIR diversity programs in terms of spreading our impact to many, many employees and corporate leaders. So Daryl Davis is one of the leaders of the FAIR diversity team, main contributor to it. He's also a main contributor to the FAIR Story curriculum. So many of you have probably heard something about Daryl Davis or seen some of his videos. Maybe his documentary you might have seen that up there, Accidental Courtesy. If you haven't familiarized yourself with Daryl's story, I'd encourage you to do so. It's pretty incredible. He converted hundreds of Ku Klux Klan members to turn in their robes and turn their backs on their racist opinions and beliefs, and to befriend Daryl, who's a black man and had attended rallies where he would try to understand what they were about and talk to them and listen to them, and that led to his converting many of them away from their racist opinions. So Daryl, his story really epitomizes in many ways what it means to be pro-human and FAIR's mission and values. So he's been a key contributor to a lot of what we do. And here are our FAIR diversity programs up there: diversity training, leadership training, pro-human, DEI consultation, and diversity courses. So just different ways in which our team can help corporations, the leadership of schools, universities, other companies, and their employees to create a pro-human culture in their organization. We've had tremendous response from all of our programs. The existing DEI trainings, as some of you might be familiar with, haven't been so successful in many instances of really improving corporate culture and bringing people together. Existing programs have not really done that very well, and ours really has, based on the feedback we've gotten, and it really brings people together in a way that other DEI trainings tend to alienate many people who encounter them. So then we'll move on to the FAIR Story learning standards and curriculum. And I'll talk more about this in detail after sort of in the next segment of the presentation here, but our learning standards inform what we do with the curriculum. Many or most of you have probably seen them. We've had, I think, nearly 1,000 requests for those learning standards, and I think they've already been really impactful. And we're building a K-12 curriculum, a full curriculum, based on those standards. So building out from the principles and learning outcomes in those standards. We have scope and sequence and lesson plans and units that are aligned with those standards. And we have 50 plus, more than that, lesson plans already up on the website. But I'll talk more about that development in a minute. The High School Ethnic Studies course, I'll also show you the outline for that course and talk a little bit more about that. We're really excited about the Ethnic Studies course because it meets the legislative directive that many states have been rolling out to teach about ethnic studies as a graduation requirement for high schools and at lower levels in some cases as well. And we think that our Ethnic Studies course meets those requirements and teaches about diversity and difference of various kinds in a genuine, complete, thorough way, but a way that also reflects the pro-human approach and that isn't divisive and doesn't have a narrow lens. Also, we consult with schools and with districts and school leaders on developing curriculum. So in many cases, a school or a district may not want a ready-made curriculum that they can just implement wholesale. And so they will ask us if we can talk them through what they already have and help them to improve it and enhance it and collaborate with them to make their curriculum better, right? And to make it reflect FAIR's approach to education. Lastly, teacher professional development. We've had a lot of requests for that and have been building out teacher training programs. And that's an essential part of building a curriculum, because once you have the curriculum in place, teachers need to be supported and feel as though they know how to teach it and feel comfortable teaching it and really embrace it, and have a resource to go to if they have questions or concerns or feedback. So the teacher professional development is a really key part of the curriculum build-out process as well. And I think that's it for the quick overview. So I think we'll take some questions now and then dive deeper into the curriculum afterwards.
Yeah, just we can introduce Heather. She's unfortunately not here, but last slide. So Heather Thomas, who unfortunately was not able to make this trip, is the Director of Marketing for Fair Story and Fair Diversity. So if anyone's interested in more information on those programs, Heather is your best person to follow up with. But of course, you can talk to us as well. You can email info@fairforall.org. It'll get routed. But Heather, I think she joined in November, I think, Fair, and just has been a powerhouse and been going to conferences, meeting school boards, so both on the corporate side and on the education side, I think she's been really, evangelizing the pro-human message. So with that, we would love to answer any questions, and then Adam is going to spend probably 20 minutes or so walking through a presentation on the Fair Story curriculum, just to go into more detail on that. But if anyone has any higher level questions, we'd be happy to answer them now.
Real quick on the questions. We have a mic, so I don't know if the mic's actually going to help you guys hear it.
Do you want to come up?
But it's going to help with the recording. So you can just raise your hand. We'll see if it gets weird, but try that.
Do you want to come up? Yes.
Hi, I'm Earl. I just have a question concerning research. I know the research around diversity and equity training is not real great, like the success level of that. Are you collecting research and data on your programs so that those can be used in promoting that in other areas?
Yeah. Yes, and the research has not been great. You're definitely accurate in that, and we are collecting feedback. I think we haven't put together a quantitative study that I think would support it, but what I will say is the methodology that we're using is a methodology that has been tested in other ways, and so there is data to support the effectiveness of this approach. With Sodexo in particular, there are survey results. So and then the leadership team at Sodexo has been very, I would say, effusive in their praise, and including people who were skeptical. I think there were people who were questioning, how is this different from All Lives Matter, or are you ignoring systemic inequalities and things like that, and we're scared that this was going to be something that would take away from some of the focus and some of the perceived gains, right, from the last 2 years. And I think that what's been really gratifying is that the people who are excited and supportive of the approach and have given positive feedback fall into both camps, right? So there are people who felt very alienated and skeptical about the, I would say the current version of DEI training, who loved the pro-human approach, but also the people who may have been perfectly fine with the other approach to DEI. They also felt more validated, because one of the central premise is that every person is a unique human being with value, and the other approach to DEI training really leans into stereotypes. So it ultimately flattens and dehumanizes everybody. And so even somebody who may have felt they were benefiting from the other training, once they're exposed to the pro-human approach, they are enthusiastic about it. So.
I know there's fair clubs for high schools. I'm wondering if there's going to be anything like that for middle school. That seems to be right where they start targeting them.
I mean, I think that would be fantastic. I'll let Adam maybe talk to that. Oh, yeah.
Yes, the question is whether there will be fair middle school clubs the same way we have the high school clubs. But yeah, that's a great point. Actually, as far as I know, I don't think we've talked about that yet, extending it to middle school, but that's a great idea, and certainly that's something that I think we should do sometime soon. Because as you say, that is a key time, transitional time leading into high school. So yeah, I think we'll take note of that and we'll do that. Yeah.
I'm assuming that companies who hire you for the diversity training are hoping to improve their ESG score. And I'm wondering if there's an environmental component to your trainings.
There's not an environmental component. So the fair, at this point, the fair diversity training is really focused on creating a unifying culture within that organization and teaching practical skills to leaders and employees within those institutions. So for example, we have a program called Sharpening Your Perspective, and that's based on an acronym SHARP, which is a toolkit for how you deal with the cognitive bias and distortion that we all have. And this is different from what some diversity training programs would call implicit bias or unconscious bias. What we're focused on is the cognitive biases that we all have, which have nothing to do with race or racism. They could manifest in that way, but it's really about confirmation bias and in-group, out-group bias and hostile attribution bias, which are just ways that the human mind copes with the overwhelming amount of information that we have. And so we take mental shortcuts. And so that can lead to people having an emotional reaction to situations or an instinctive reaction to situations instead of actually being thoughtful and reacting to the person and treating them with dignity and understanding that in this particular situation, maybe your cognitive distortions are affecting how you're perceiving the situation. So that's the sort of training that we're doing, but we're not doing any environmental training at this point. Yes.
So this is a semi-selfish question, right? As my role is to help the organization grow, become better integrated and networked within the state of Utah. Mm-hmm. The greatest strength, in my perspective, of FAIR is its cut and dry, staunch, nonpartisan stance. Its greatest weakness, in my experience, for creating the fervor and the enthusiasm that partisanship can so easily create, is an issue, or something that I'm witnessing, right? And so I would be curious, with your bird's eye view of what's happening with FAIR nationally, what are approaches that could be taken by myself, but also by those here that feel strongly about FAIR, that we could take in order to generate the partisan level of enthusiasm for the middle, right? Mm-hmm. I think most of us are in the middle, in truth, but that nonpartisanship, in my view, is sort of a double-edged sword, and I'd love to just hear any wisdom that you can share with us about that.
Sure, that's a great question. I'm gonna ask Angel. No, I'm just kidding. I will answer, and then I will ask Angel to comment on it. But I think that I think being nonpartisan is central to what we're doing. I don't think we would have a reason to exist if we were a partisan organization. I think there are plenty of partisan organizations out there. And I think ultimately we need to be nonpartisan because we need to ensure that these values are represented across all political parties. And you don't want a situation where the fundamental values are changing, election to election. That's just a dangerous situation and furthers polarization. So the short answer is we have to be nonpartisan. I think that one way to inspire the same level of enthusiasm, because tribalism inspires enthusiasm. I mean, I think and tribalism works. It's instinctual. It's something that's innate in all of us. But I think that over time, a positive message wins out over a negative message. And so I think that one approach would be to have fun with it. I think we have a very positive, truly inclusive message, and I think have parties, have events. I think now that we're on the tail end of the pandemic and in-person events are more possible, I feel like there's so much that can be done to just take this positive energy and share it with the world, and I think that attracts people. So that would be one thought that I have.
All I can say is, yeah, you're right that it's easier to get people animated and amped up and ready to go, flip cars over and do stuff like that. If you point out a villain, if you point out a person to hate. But all I can think of is Gandhi liberated a country, and he never hated anyone. He loved the people who were beating them down. Martin Luther King liberated an entire people, and he did it by loving the people that were beating them down and hating them. He refused to hate them. There's so much more power there than we account for most of the time. And yeah, it's kind of a slow burn, but it still gets the pot cooked. You know what I mean? It still gets the food ready to go. And I think in the long run, as Brian said, it's the better way, because that super hot heat, that's where destruction comes from. That's where mistakes get made. That's where terrible things start to happen, because we're not thinking clearly. All we're thinking is, I need to satisfy this immediate urge. We need to, we're good at this. We've figured it out, right? We're all here, we're all dressed. We all, figured out what time to get here, right? We can train ourselves to be better than our base instincts. And I think we benefit from it. That's why we're all here. So that's what I would say.
I have a quick thing to add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add. Just to add to what Angel and Brian said, I think that political change, I think, is often fueled by negativity, and it's short-term and short-lived. But cultural change, I think, is more powerfully fueled by positivity and by what you're for, right? Love, hope. I think that fuels cultural change, which takes longer, but is also more powerful and sustainable. So, and I think FAIR is aiming more for a cultural change than a short-term political change. So, but yeah, just add to that.
I can't remember your name, but you were talking about focusing on the center, but Daryl Davis actually reached out to his polar opposite. And I think sometimes reaching out to your polar opposite, and that's what I tend to do. And actually, I'll give credit to Darlene back here too, because we're kind of polar opposites and have reached out, and maybe didn't turn out quite the way, but it's just beginning of conversations. And I think that also brings a lot of fun to it, is reaching out and seeing when George Floyd was first killed, I reached out to the Black Lives Matter person in Northern Utah. We've become good friends. We're still don't agree on a lot politically, but I think I wouldn't focus on the center. I think when you reach out to your polar opposites, you bring a lot of the center people in. But one of the things I like multiple things I like about FAIR is it's very transparent. And a lot of diversity of thought, because I'm part of Lexit, which is outreach to Black conservatives, who I feel like their voices get marginalized. So I like the nonpartisan aspect, but also like the diversity of thought that you have in your fair board. The only thing I would have maybe a little concern over, and not that I do, from everything I've read, because I'm part of your news list, is there any long-term views? I mean, you're the owner of it, or you're the founder of it, like open borders. I mean, what would scare conservatives off of this? Is there any thing that you're hoping, one world government, open borders? I mean, are y'all staying away from that type of political thing? Because I think what you've put together is fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think we are relentlessly nonpartisan, and that includes, not taking positions on issues that are outside of the narrow scope of FAIR's philosophy. And so we are, I think it was actually a conservative who's on the FAIR team who coined the term, which I really embraced, which is we are politically inclusive, right? So I think that, we don't really care. And I make a point, I have never asked Angel how he's voted or what his politics are. I've never asked Adam. I've never asked anyone. I just don't talk about that. And if there are people who are very open about it, and that's important to them. So, and if they want to share that, fantastic, share it. But I think that when it comes to political issues that are outside the scope, are you pro-life or pro-choice, or those, we're a big tent. We are open to people from all different backgrounds, all different political viewpoints. It's really this unifying set of values that we're advocating for.
If I may. I just would love to add a couple of things there. I think it's very easy for us to forget that people come before politics. You need people before there can be politics. And if the people can't communicate, if the people can't sit down in a room and hash it out, whether they're for, throw open the gates, open borders, or no, we need to tamp down and completely shut everything down. If they can't have a conversation, then neither is going to get what they want, or any version of what they want, or any solution that is even remotely possible, because communication is everything. And I think FAIR's focus is on ensuring that initial communication, right? We're not going to take a stand on something like that. What we take a stand on is we need to be able to talk to each other. We need to be able to do this. And speaking to what you mentioned about the center, or I think that we also have to have a different idea of what victory is, right? What is victory when we are talking to someone that we disagree with, right? This person that you reached out to, sitting down and having a conversation, that's the victory. If you can leave that conversation open to having another one, that's the victory, right? Changing people's minds takes a long time, right? Daryl Davis did what he did, but it took years to bring someone out of, that far and warped of an ideology to becoming a friend and handing a KKK robe over. That takes a long time. Changing people's minds takes a long time.
I don't even know if that should be an objective of changing people's minds.
Right.
As much as being able to hear people and understand their perspectives. I mean, I think you need the yin and yang to make society work.
Exactly.
And so I don't think you necessarily have to go into it to change minds, but just to create an atmosphere in which you can have mutual respect for individuals.
Perfect. Exactly.
Just a quick question, because unfortunately I won't be able to stay for the whole talk on the curriculum. Where can we get information about the curriculum?
Yes, great question. So we do have some information, I think, on tables out there, but also feel free to reach out to myself or to Heather Thomas, who's our Director of Marketing right there. So she's the main point of contact. I would reach out to her, but feel free to also reach out to myself, and I'm sure Angel and Byron are also would be happy to respond to any questions you might have. But yeah, if you get in touch with Heather, she has all the materials that you might be interested to see.
But there's a website, which is fairstory.org. So, okay, perfect. Right there.
Well, listening to this program, because as of right now, if you go on Unified Development, and we stand because we stand for Royal Purple, which means that this is why this is kind of, I see why Miss Jamie, and also I work with Miss Jamie also with Blessing, but we have our own organization along with my mother, and we stand as Royal Purple. So we have red, we have blue, we don't care who we work with. I work dearly in Ogden City in the advocacy of this historical African-American recreational center that we're trying to save right now. But the community once was a historical African-American community, but it's diverse now. So seeing everything and seeing how FAIR stands, it seems like that we're on the same road. By listening to what you guys are talking about is exactly what we're trying to stand for in Ogden City. It's standing for the historical African-American, recreational center. But it's so much more that adds this diversity in the community, and this is exactly what we stand for as well. So it's an honor to actually be here to listen, to hear somebody that actually stands true nonpartisan as we do. Even though I work with I've met a lot of fine Republican friends, and also trying to, work with everyone else to get to a medium point to do what's right by Ogden City. So this is pretty interesting. I'm glad I came. I just wanted to speak my piece to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
How do you help your members manage the situation of their feeling that their immediate circle will call them traitors for talking to the other side? What do you have in your programs that can help people who really want to do it, but are getting a lot of pressure that you're not with us? So
I think that's a valid concern. I think part of what we're trying to do, and we're just under a year old really, but is to establish our credibility as being nonpartisan, and so hopefully not, as an organization, not be perceived as the other side, but instead be perceived as pardon the term, but a safe space for everyone to come to. So, but I do think there's still that is still an issue, and I think it's just the nature of tribalism that some people will perceive anyone who is not 100% on board with everything that they believe, they will perceive that person as a threat. So I think the biggest thing that we can do as an organization is to be true to our nonpartisan approach, so that people who are involved with FAIR don't feel like they are shifting to the other side, but instead they're finding a place that can be a home for people from any political background. I don't know, Angel, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Well, speaking on the interpersonal level, I've gotten every name in the book. I've been told everything. I'm a fence sitter. I'm both siding, blah, 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 blah. What I am is a Marxist. I am a Groucho Marxist. And by that I mean that I would never be a part of any club that would have me as a member. And so my approach is to say, if anybody who thinks I'm on their team is wrong, and anybody who thinks I'm not on their team is wrong. And call me whatever you want to call me, but I love you anyway, and I care about you anyway, and I'm here if you want to talk. And I think we should encourage that. It's difficult, but we should encourage that. And the more of us there are, I am Spartacus. The more of us there are, the easier it'll be for others. So
You're Spartacus Marxist.
right. I'll be here all week.
I know.
Will you really?
No,
Oh,
no, we leave tomorrow. Yes.
Hi, Anthony. I'm the mother of several high school age kids. Okay, and so I'm curious, well, you're going to talk about the curriculum. I'm curious how you're going to go in and change these minds, but they're getting it from everyone. It's not just the kids you're going to have to talk to. You're going to have to talk to the teachers. because my kids, they get English, they get history, it's all intertwined. And it's not just gonna be like, okay, so here's this little club over here, because then they're gonna go to history class and they're gonna learn this. And they're gonna go to English and they're gonna learn this. I mean, I help my daughter, she's barely with just a simple English project where it's all integrated and which is great. But you're finding a lot of opinions and this, I feel like this is, I'm really glad that you're doing this, but it's gonna be hard.
We know.
How are you going to do this? Is it gonna be a separate class? Or is it going to be, are you gonna just, do we have your work back?
Yeah, just what I would say is I think that there is an actual course, and I think that is for schools that want to have, for example, an ethnic studies standalone course, then there's a course that can be offered. I think the ultimate goal of our approach is to help expose children to diverse perspectives and ideas and give them the skills to make their own decisions and think for themselves, because then it doesn't matter what they're exposed to in different classrooms. I think ultimately what we want is to have kids who are able to embody those values of fairness, understanding, and humanity, and so again, it could be a standalone course, it could be a high school club, it could be a future middle school club, but I think there are different ways of exposing children to those ideas, but that's really the end goal is to have children who are resilient and are able to think for themselves and then expose them to the information in different ways.
Yeah, just to add to that, definitely we are under no illusions about how difficult our task is and is going to be. But as Brian says, the curriculum has many different dimensions to it. It can be used in many different ways. So there is the standalone course, ethnic studies course for places particularly that require that. We also have, lesson plans that a teacher can just take, one of the lesson plans or a unit of 7 lesson plans. Maybe it's something they're already teaching, right? So maybe in a history course, teachers teaching about slavery in early America or something, right, in Revolutionary America. They can just take our unit of lessons and use that and plug it into their history course. Of course, they have to want to do that, right? And so that's where outreach comes in and working with schools and talking to teachers and showing them the merits of our curriculum, and that takes time. And then we also have the full curriculum that is transdisciplinary. So as you're saying, these concepts and ideas regarding race and difference get mixed into English, history, social studies, all sorts of different subjects. So our curriculum also is not a curriculum for a particular subject. It can be integrated across subjects and across disciplines, and it's designed that way. So we're trying to meet that challenge head on as well, sort of in a totalizing way. But certainly there are many strategies at play in implementing curriculum as we're trying to this ambitious. I mean, not only do you have to work with schools and with school boards and teachers, but also policymakers, as we were today, state legislators who are crafting legislation around this and guidance for the boards of education, the governor's offices who are have a policy role to play. And we're talking with those folks here and elsewhere and consulting with them. And so that's a longer term effect, but we also hope to have an effect at that level that will then trickle down and help facilitate us to implement our curriculum in schools. So, yeah.
What's in store for fair in medicine and fair in the arts?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, great question. So fair in medicine, we actually are hiring someone who's going, so it's been all volunteer organization. There are a number, I think 10 or more doctor fellows who are volunteers. We're actually hiring somebody who's going to be really taking that program to the next level. But what we want to do is address what I would call a race essentialist approach in various professional networks and give a home for people who want to stand up for fairness, understanding, and humanity and fair values, and the pro-human approach. So Fair in Medicine, I expect over the coming months, is going to really continue to grow and probably grow dramatically, because once you have somebody who's just 100% dedicated to it, who is a doctor herself, and I'm very excited about that program. Fair in the Arts, we have not launched yet, but it is imminently. It's within the next few weeks. We're going to be launching that program, and that, I think, in some ways is the most needed professional network. I think the arts have been decimated by the really the growing intolerance, and I think there are so many artists who are suffering and feel that they can't be themselves, they can't express themselves creatively, and so in terms of the cultural impact, I think Fair in the Arts is desperately needed. So I was just on a planning call for Fair in the Arts, and people are very emotional. I mean, they're crying, just kind of thinking about what they're dealing with and how they have to self-censor, and just so providing that network where artists can come together and support each other, and ultimately have that continue to grow. And then in the same way that Fair in Medicine is now moving on to the next level, I think Fair in the Arts would go that direction as well. Yes.
The things that the teachers can pull, can other people pull those too? Last summer I went to, I just brought in like 15 kids and just like expressed to them how the civil rights movement is different than what we're watching, or how it's the same. I just want to know, how can just random people pull? I am a chapter leader with FAIR, but I just wanted to know what kind of training can we get, so that I would love to just be able to get on a YouTube video and go, oh, this is exactly what I should be doing, and then be able to bring that to kids. And I would love it if we could just start building a community of people who are like, I'm going to have kids over on Monday night, and we're just going to talk, and have something to express to them.
That's wonderful. So kind of an in-home discussion club. Right. Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. I mean, that's really so we have a whole education team. If I have to say where we are the strongest right now, I think it is on K through 12 education. So we have a number of people already working on that. We have an amazing woman starting in April who was a professor at a teaching college and has that background. So she's she's coming to the table. But I think at this point we have at least 5 people who are just dedicated, out of our team, who are just dedicated to K through 12 education, and we have talked about doing programming. I know for the Fair Story curriculum, the plan is to make that accessible to everyone. So there are lessons you can download, but having a learning management system where you can go in, and even if you're homeschooling or you wanted to use it as something for an in-home club, discussion club, you would have access to that material. Yes.
So I have a couple of questions. I'll try to keep it brief. So do you have any plans on trying to take this diversity program into like government spaces, so like public spaces where you're talking to, because it seems like that's an area that has been kind of captured. I have a son who's at the Air Force Academy, and all of these spaces have been kind of captured. So having this pro-human training, I think, would be very useful in some of these public spaces. So I don't know the mechanics of that, but I'm just wondering if you're planning on going there. The other question I have really quickly is, so I also have teenagers, and it seems like they are educated as much by social media these days as they are by what they learn in school through curriculum. And so I'm wondering if I see my kids on Instagram, and they're getting these very bombastic rants, on either side, like very polarizing rants, and so I'm wondering if you have plans. Your social media presence is great, but it seems more geared to adults at this point. If you have any plans to kind of gear any of that to kids, talking directly to them so that they're not just hearing ranting?
Yes. Social media, I think we have a great team. I agree with you. We need to do more to reach the TikTok generation. I think I think that most of our messaging and content, I think, is targeted at adults, but it is something that we are actively working on, and I think we have a great social media team, and we've discussed exactly that challenge. What was your first question?
All about getting into public spaces, like government.
Government. So yes, I think FAIR. I mean, this is why we, I think as Adam made a reference to a cultural shift. I think that ultimately all of these institutions, including government, are downstream from culture. But I think that there's a lot that we can do with government. When we were in the Capitol today, we spoke with who's the two governors' advisors, including the director of education, I think, and so we spoke with him, and one of the things that we offered is to bring the FAIR pro-human approach to, in this case, to the Utah government, because government agencies, including in Utah, are engaging in training, and chances are that training is steeped in the more divisive race essentialist approach, which ultimately flattens and dehumanizes. And there's a real opportunity to bring the pro-human approach to those organizations as well. So I think just like with corporations, just like with medical institutions, just like with the arts, I think within government, there's a huge need for that as well. Great, yes?
I have shared this with actually a lot of state senators that I work with as an option, because currently there's a bill that's going to be up to get rid of CRT and curriculum. So far it's free, from my understanding, y'all don't charge. Is that your long-term vision of trying to find a way to do this without charging schools $200,000 or $300,000 to be part of this?
Yeah, I mean, so FAIR is 100% a mission-based nonprofit. Many of us, myself included, are volunteers. We do have paid staff, so there are people who are full-time and need to receive a paycheck. So we do have about 20 people who are paid staff members of FAIR. I think my personal goal would be that no institution, no school ever chooses a different approach based on cost. And so the approach that we're taking is to make it very low cost. The curriculum itself, I don't anticipate we will ever charge for. The training, the implementation, maybe there would be a charge, but what we are offering now and what we plan to continue to offer are grants to schools that maybe don't have the funding to cover that. So what we're seeing, for example, in California, where there's a liberated ethnic studies program, which is really based more on a postmodernist critical theory lens, which is kind of reducing people into black, brown, white. It's kind of these very simplistic identity categories, and is incredibly divisive. Their program, I think there was a school district we were talking to, Liberated Ethnic Studies was charging $80,000, and we came in, and frankly, I would have done it. We would do it at no cost, but I think that there's a risk to that. I think people perceive, if you're not charging, they perceive it as not having value. So we came in with, I think, a $20,000 cost or something. So and if the cost became the issue, we would find a way to give a grant to not charge anything. So I think our intention is to really ensure that any institution, any individual that wants to pursue the pro-human approach can do so, and that we frankly should be the lowest cost option for them as well. And and I think if we need to raise more money to do that, then we will raise more money to do that. So yes, and are we close? Are we close on time, or what's the
Probably
last question? Okay, terrific.
I don't know if you noticed the announcement from the American Bar Association that they, I believe, have now set accreditation standards to require DEI, or so I don't recall the exact wording used, but something akin to that at the law school level. And I think that's really important. I'm curious whether the legal aspect of FAIR has any intention to try to ensure that there's curriculums available at that level to ensure that those coming out of law schools, because I believe there's only 200 accredited law schools in the US, aren't steeping their legal education purely in one school of thought. Because I know there could be concerns regarding what that would look like in the future, given the amount of power that legal professionals wield in society.
No, I wasn't aware of that issue. I mean, I think, unfortunately, I think the legal profession for a very long time has been steeped in, I think if, again, I try not to talk about critical race theory because I think it's become a very politicized term, and I think it's misused in many cases. But, there is an actual theory called critical race theory, and it came out of the legal profession. And so I think that I do think that that's problematic, and I'll talk to Letitia Kim is the head of the Fair Legal Network, and she's amazing, and we have so we have a 3-person legal team, and then we have 100 people in the Fair Legal Network. But I'll speak with her because I think if there's any
Recent law school grad from a few years back, so
okay.
Became very familiar with the direction it was heading, and the writing was kind of on the wall by the time I graduated. So this is more of a, at least on my end, a concern of institutionalizing what you just described, which is that it's been baked in one school of thought for a long time, but this is a more formalized. I mean, there can be a lot of consequences to losing accreditation. There can be, you can't sit for the bar exam in a lot of cases if you don't go to an accredited law school. And then, of course, just other concerns regarding ethics that could become steeped in the profession itself. So, at least from my vantage point, it's one thing to be sort of forced into one ideological box while you're there. It's another for this to become, for lack of a better word, baked in and systemic within the institution itself. So.
No, that's a great point. So Leslie, if I'd love to connect you with Letitia and share whatever information you have, but I agree with you, so thank you. Terrific. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam to talk about, in more depth, about Fair Story. So thank you.
Why don't we do the PowerPoint? Why don't we do, I'll do the PowerPoint real quick and then go to the Word, yeah. All right, so I'm just gonna give a quick, I know we're running a little behind on time, so quick overview of the Fair Story curriculum, and then quickly show you just a couple of documents that are parts of the curriculum as we're developing it. So here, this is just a representation, a historical sort of progression representation that actually mirrors, I think, the story that Angel told about growing up. And so the first there in the 80s and 90s, and this is the kind of experience I had too in terms of growing up in my lifetime, that you had this movement for multicultural education, celebrating differences between people, trying different foods from different cultures, that kind of thing. And then the next stage of that was the kind of, there are many ways of putting this, but identity checklist where people started becoming more sort of pushed into rigid identity groups that were then pitted against each other in the way Angel described, and these became fault lines rather than sort of cool differences. And that's sort of, I think, where we have been and where we are in large part still right now. And then the next step is an education and a curriculum inspired by the pro-human movement, which is what we're building with the Fair Story curriculum. So that's just to say that I view the Fair Story curriculum not as an alternative to what's out there, but actually as the future, as the next phase that we should be moving towards in teaching about diversity and race. And just to kind of contextualize it, that we're not, as we've been saying, we're not on the right or the left. This is something different, and I think it really is the next step in this progression. So our approach is a complete approach characterized by honesty and optimism is the way I put it, but essentially not papering over or neglecting the injustices and negative parts of American history, but also highlighting the positive contributions and insights that we can build upon in the future. As opposed to these incomplete approaches, and I just list two there, the caricatures of what's out there, but much of what's out there in terms of American history curricula does fit into one of those boxes, right? Either the sort of triumphal story of American history or the negative, very critical, right, version of American history. And so the Fair Story curriculum is neither of those. It's a complete approach. All right, so here's a just quick timeline of where we've been. Fair Story launched a few months after the Fair as an organization launched. Our pro-human learning standards there, went through a couple of versions. Our website, fairstory.org, launched in September of last year. And then we also just completed our Introduction to Ethnic Studies course outline, which I'll briefly show you and talk about. In the coming year, by the end of March, we plan to have the full K-12 pro-human curriculum completed, and I'll briefly show you the K through 2 version of that. Lesson plans, scope and sequence for each grade band. So we're doing it by grade band. So K-2, 3-5, 6-8, 9-12. We're going to redesign the fairstory.org website to make it even more effective and user-friendly. This summer, we're planning summer programs for high school students and teachers. We're finalizing those plans, not sure yet exactly what those will look like, but we think it'll be important to do that this summer in preparation for our ethnic studies high school course being adopted in schools this fall, and other, of course, aspects of the full curriculum. And then also a full K-12 ethnic studies curriculum will be completed as well, that will build sort of downward from the high school course to prepare students at the elementary and middle school levels to appreciate our high school ethnic studies course. So kind of two tracks for curriculum development there. And this is just an overview of the Introduction to Ethnic Studies course here. So it's broken into 3 parts. The first part is really foundational, and this distinguishes Fair Story's Ethnic Studies course from many others that are out there, particularly by contextualizing differences of ethnicity, culture, and identity, contextualizing that within humanity and showing how those relate to each other. So how does my identity as a black person relate to my identity as someone whose ancestors came from Nigeria, to my identity as a man, and then my identity as a human being, right? Something like that. How do all those fit together and relate to one another and become contextualized? And then the second subpart there, part 1, this is the connection to American civics, which I think is really important to draw in the context of ethnic studies, just to show that all of our stories in some way feed into and connect up with a shared American story, that it's important that they do so at some point and in some way if we're going to share political institutions and particularly Republican, Democratic, small r, small d institutions where we have to work with each other, right, and no matter what our backgrounds might be to enact policy. So that's a really, I think, key component. And then the third there also builds on that the sub 3 of part 1, e pluribus unum, right? That in some way we want to think that we'll come together into a unity out of our different backgrounds, right? So that part one, I think, is a distinctive foundation for our course. Then in part two, as we explore particular ethnicities, that we give in-depth explorations of particular histories, cultures, movements, and individual stories within these groupings. So we do teach about African American history, Latino Americans, Asian and Pacific Islander Americans, Native Americans, but we do so in a way that is sensitive to the extremely important diversity within those groupings, right? And the uniqueness of individuals within them, and the particular stories and histories that those people have experienced. So that's a distinctive approach, I think, to treating topics of ethnicity and race, that we really try to humanize it, so to speak, by looking at individual stories and connecting them also with the context of our shared humanity. And then part three finishes with a capstone project where students sort of pull it all together and author their own narratives, sort of personal narratives, also in a way that connects their personal story and narrative with their belonging in and participation in American civic life. So that's the kind of civic engagement hook to the whole thing, which is really important, and a lot of teachers in schools want that sort of civic engagement component to these ethnic studies courses, and we think that this will be a positive way of building that in. All right, so I think that's the quick overview of where we are and where we're going. And then maybe, I'll just walk through or show you quickly a couple of documents that relate to that overview. Yeah, maybe the K-2 one. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so this is the K-2 version or component of the pro-human curriculum that we're building out. And actually it's exciting because there's actually relatively little at the younger grade level, teaching kids, young kids at these ages, about diversity and difference and how to view that. Of course, more and more we are seeing that, but it's more recent and less established, I think, at the younger grade level. So it's exciting that we will have such a robust offering to give to students at this grade level. So if you can just scroll, well, if you see the FAIR standards and objectives there. So this curriculum is built out from the FAIR learning standards. So each of the objectives and outcomes in the learning standards is given a corresponding lesson plan or lesson plans. So this is the humanity category, right? So our learning standards have four main principles: humanity, diversity, fairness, and understanding. And so for humanity, we'll have all of these lessons. We have something similar for diversity, similarly for fairness, and for understanding. But this is pretty extensive and detailed. So if you scroll down slowly, you can see an introduction there, scope and sequence, attaching the outcome to questions, to resources. And this is just a general level. And then if you scroll down further, thanks, keep scrolling. So there's lesson one. So that objective, I can understand what it means to be a human being. There's a whole lesson on that. There's a video there, one of the Fair Story curriculum videos, an opening for the teacher. Then if you scroll down a little more to the next page, guided practice, and playing the video, questions associated with it. And then scroll down further, closing and an extension activity or assignment. And we have all these components for multiple lesson plans within each principle for each grade band. And actually, if you scroll down further, there's a couple others I'd like to highlight. A little further. Oh, this one, maybe scroll up again a little bit. So this is the human walk activity, which I think is an interesting one to highlight. So some of you probably heard of the privilege walk activities that students do. So this is a version of that, but more in line with FAIR's approach, where students line up, and if they if the statement applies to them, then they take a step forward. And so then students just kind of see what they have in common with their classmates. And this is a more positive, affirming, and a more pro-human way of doing the kind of walk exercise and activity than one that we often see in schools today, right? Which is the privilege walk. You've all heard of that activity. So that's one example. And keep scrolling down. And so the materials there, so this is all just excellent books, resources that are all linked in here, and activities associated with each of them, and assignments, and then kind of closing questions and extension activities. So we could just, I could go through, I mean, this is a long document, as you see on the side there, right? So this is like, 18 pages long. But I just want to give you a sense of what we have and of what's coming soon. All this will be available on the website, the redesigned website. And as I said, we'll have this, something of this magnitude for each of the 4 main principles and then for each grade band. So it'll be a pretty extensive curriculum, and we're on track to have it all by the end of March. Yeah, question? Oh, okay, yeah. Good. So then maybe a quick look at the Intro to Ethnic Studies outline, and then if take a couple of questions. So this as well, I just wanted to show you sort of how extensive this document is. It's going to be published soon. I think it's not quite ready yet, but this is the full high school course outline. And so there you see there are multiple units, so a few parts with multiple units within them, and all of those components for each, right? So essential questions, concepts, readings, sample assignments, assessments, and a whole weekly schedule outlined for each of those parts. And we also are going to build out lesson plans that will fill into each of these as well. That's going to take still some time. We have some of it already, and some of it is already up on the website, but we plan to build it out completely so that if a teacher or a school wants just the whole course to give to their teacher with nothing to prepare other than learning how to teach it, we will have that. But we already have this full outline, which takes them a good portion of the way. As you see, it's more than 50 pages worth of material. And yeah, maybe we can just look through. It's just an introductory material here, explaining the course, the standards that it aligns to. So there's the curriculum map. Maybe scroll down a little further. Yeah, so this is the Principles of American Politics unit, overview, questions, concepts, and then scroll down further, the sources and assignments, and we have this for each of the units, each of the parts within the unit. All right, so it's all this will be publicly available very soon, but I just want to give you a sneak peek to show you sort of the extent of the materials that we've developed and how excited we are about them. We already have more materials than I think any of the competitors that are out there in terms of consulting on curriculum for ethnic studies or diversity education. I think we already have more than anyone else does. So we're really gonna be blowing our competitors, so to speak, out of the water here, I think, with just the amount of material we have, and I think also the quality of it. So our team is really incredible. A really experienced, expert, smart, thoughtful team of curriculum writers. So does anybody have any questions in particular about the curriculum or on a more detailed level that I might be able to answer? Yes?
Just a quick question, this might be a stupid one. With the high school course, is that a course in and of itself, or is it one that they would hand to a history teacher? Would it be integrated in already?
Yeah, the high school course, so the high school ethnic studies course, that we're designing for schools and teachers who are actually looking for a course called ethnic studies. And so that's the first state to really develop that was California. So they now have a requirement in place that all high school students who graduate, I think, starting with the class of 2024, I believe, or 2025 maybe, but starting with that class, all students have to have taken and passed an ethnic studies course, called an ethnic studies. So, and other states have adopted or are in the process of adopting similar legislation. So for that course, we're primarily thinking of ethnic studies titled courses. Yeah, for the...
Would there be an add-on for, like, my kid's high school right now? I would love to see something like this put into a U.S. government law class, which they're already taking. It would be such a great fit. Is there, like, maybe an add-on?
Yeah. So I think that the other version of the other track of the curriculum development, the K-12 pro-human curriculum, once we get the high school portion of that curriculum written, I think that may be a good candidate for fitting into to existing history courses. And also, of course, we have lesson plans and units, as I said, that you can sort of plug in. So your history teacher, if they're interested in seeing and using our resources, they can do that with the course they're already teaching and just use our lesson plans or units for certain topics that they're already covering. So, yeah, sure. Yeah.
What do you think is the best approach for getting these in front of teachers? I think that the majority of our teachers have good intentions, and I think that they're kind of slow-boiled into this is the only way to be compassionate is to apply what's already going out. So, in my experience of trying to say, hey, look at this, they're like, no, we've already got it figured out. Do you think that if our kids went and said, this is what we want, we would rather have this, and what would be the successful way to be slow-boiled teachers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if having the kids tell them about it would help. I think, often the administration can be helpful. So if there's an administration that's receptive to trying some of our materials or just disseminating it to their teachers, saying, hey, here's a resource if you want to incorporate this in some of your courses, I think that could be helpful.
So like as parents sending emails that say, hey, have you looked at this, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, have you looked at this? And I think reaching out to teachers directly as a parent, I think would be fine, or reaching out to administration, school leadership, saying, hey, I found this resource, it looks really great, maybe could some of the teachers take a look at it? That could work too. Introducing them to FAIR in general, and then letting them know that there are these particular resources. That could be another strategy. Getting a group of parents together maybe to say, hey, this is a really good resource. We're wondering if the school could consider adopting it, or school boards as well. Yeah. So at the
PTA meetings and showing them.
Yes, a PTA meeting. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
School community council. I don't know. Could that be involved?
We have these in Utah that we get to decide how to use money on stuff, but we also get to make decisions. Maybe that could be a place to introduce it to.
Yeah, I think so. That sounds like it would be. Yeah, any kind of school community forum, I think, would be an appropriate place to pitch some of our materials. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I noticed the California one was specific to California, so this is kind of an American curriculum that y'all, because I'm on the ethics study committee, bipartisan, that we're trying to come up with a curriculum and pass along it. Would y'all make it individual to each state?
Yes, absolutely. So, and already within the California one, there's room for it to be individual, even to local communities, right, within the state. But certainly, yeah. So for California, they mandate that you teach about the four racial ethnic groupings that I mentioned. In other states, they might word it differently, or there might be different groups or different requirements. So absolutely, we would adapt what we've built for California to the requirements of different states. Yeah. And as you said, much of it would be able to be translated directly over, and it would just be a matter of adapting other things. Yeah, absolutely. Gabe?
Last question.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. All right, well, thank you so much.
I'm sorry, if
Yeah.
she wants to ask another one, that's okay. The last one.
Okay, we can talk afterwards. All right, yeah, thanks so much for the time and the opportunity to present, and really excited to be here.
Once again, folks, thank you for coming and spending some time with us this
this evening. I didn't acknowledge and won't individually, but we do have 3 or 4 perhaps members of Utah State Board of Education here tonight. So thank you to those board members. We've also heard from leaders from a number of other organizations from the state of Utah, our friends in Ogden, Lex, I'm sure there's others that I'm not pointing to. Brave Rangers I know is here. Forgive me if I've left you out, but we really do appreciate you coming together for this truly nonpartisan and above all else pro-human conversation tonight. So thank you all for your time. The presenters will stick around till they kick us out, or till 8:30. If you have any particular questions that you'd like to raise with any of the presenters, likewise in the back from the Utah local chapter, if you'd like to get involved, come find me. Hello. We also have here tonight Jefferson and Alicia, who are our presidents. Could I also have any other FAIR leadership members just raise their hands in case? Alrighty, you wanna track these folks down. Thank you all very much. Travel safely.
Thank you.